Well, since I know I'm not going to be the chair, why don't I just start? So, I'm Greg Rowland, and I figured maybe it would be helpful, since there's so many new faces here at today's meeting, just to go around and do a quick introduction. So, anyhow, Greg Rowland, I'm a city council appointee to this CPA committee.
Ed Swinicky, Housing Authority.
Jay Ryan, I represent the Conservation Commission on this committee.
Andy Hunter, I'm in Park and Rec.
John Bruner, I'm here for Historical Commission.
Dan Riss, City Council. I'm Finance Chair now, taking Dan Hagan's place.
Harry Schulten, Planning Board.
Ryan Berry, new City Council appointee.
And Scott Kavanaugh, I'm the mayoral appointee.
What was your name again?
Ryan Berry.
Ryan.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm Jamie Webb. I'm the administrative help and assistant planner.
Jamie facilitates 99% of what goes on around here. So I guess the first order of business is to make some decisions about chair and vice chair for this committee.
You're doing a hell of a job.
Yeah, people wanted me to
Dangerous.
The reason I know I'm not doing it is because I just accepted a treasury role at a big not-for-profit that's gonna, and I have 3 small children, so I'm pretty much exempting myself from this. But for the sake of facilitating this conversation, I figured I'd just jump in. So, I think there was some discussion in December about needing to do this first order of business, and I don't really know exactly how we want to proceed. There was some discussion, I guess, of having somebody who had some experience on this board being the chair, knowing that there are 3 new people here. Not sure if we actually reached a final decision that had to happen, but.
I think if anybody wants to do it.
Yeah.
I think that answer's kind of evident.
No one volunteered to the last meeting to do it, that's all.
Somebody may need to step forward.
Guys, I ran the city council for years. I'll do it, but I don't know your committee, so that's kind of a little iffy. It's a matter of protocol and Robert's rules. I'm happy to do that, but I don't know if I can.
Well, we depend a lot on Jamie for what the CPA can and can't do. So
I'm going to depend a lot on Jamie as a member, but
I have to say that I think that on the whole we valued the 2 members that were outgoing members that have a ton of city council experience and relied heavily.
Who was the other member, Dan?
Ed Sparko.
Oh, Ed was, yeah.
Yep.
He and I joined the council together.
Tommy Trouble.
Yep. So I have no personal objection to to you being chair, and I imagine you probably have.
Why did I actually make a motion?
Yes, would somebody like to make a motion?
There has to be some flexibility on timing, because my Thursday nights aren't always free. So if it has to be 6:30, I may not be the right choice, because, for instance, the next meeting is the 18th of February, and I don't think I'm available. So if we elect a vice chair, fine. I don't know. So I want to tell you that if we're not flexible in what time we meet, sometimes I'd like to meet 5:30, and I could get here. But
can we change meeting times?
Yeah, that's complete. I was going to bring that up at the end of the meeting.
The open meeting law just requires you to post it. You can change time.
So as long as we change it by Wednesday or something like that.
It would be nice to.
48 hours.
It would be nice to sort of
well,
pick a day and time that you can have regular meetings, and then.
I think it's good to have regular time, because you are such a public committee, and people will know, hey, the CPA's meeting tonight at 6:30. So I'm not suggesting that you change it. I'm just saying I may have some issues.
From time to time, we can adjust the timing of the meeting.
I'm happy to act in Dan's absence when he can't be here.
So
as
that's
well. Like Dan,
Vice chair.
I'm brand new to the committee, but I acted as legal counsel to a lot of municipal committees over the years, so I know how they run.
Okay. Well, it sounds like vice chair volunteering now. Thanks, Ryan.
Jamie, do you always do the agenda?
Generally, what I've done in the past is I draft up the agenda and I send it to the chair about a week and a half, 2 weeks ahead of the meeting.
I like that plan.
And then if there's any changes or additions or whatever, then we communicate over it, and then it's finalized and sent to the committee and city clerk.
Since I've not been on this committee, you run it the way you have been in the past.
Yes.
If I venture into a area that isn't usual, let me know. Okay, I'm gonna run it the way I run any committee, Robert's Rules of Orders, motions, etc. We need to be formal about it. I would like it recorded, and I'm glad to see you guys are all okay with recording it. I believe in transparency, so that's very important to me. Everybody's okay with that? Okay, I'll do it. You need to make a motion and a nomination?
I'll move to nominate Dan Rist as chair.
Second.
And
Barry.
second. Yeah, I guess we'll do two separate motions?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion on Dan Rist assuming chair of the CPA committee?
Are you sure about this?
It's always impeachment.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nay.
So then for vice chair, Ryan, say your name, last name?
Barry.
Ryan Barry has graciously volunteered to put his name forward, so may I have a motion to nominate Ryan Barry as
I'll
vice chair.
nominate Ryan Barry as vice chair.
Second it.
Who seconded?
Yep.
Any further discussion on Ryan? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, thank you,
Um,
both of you.
I still don't know all your names really well.
Sure.
I use your first name, so when they're calling you, you're,
Just point.
please don't feel that I'm being rude. I just
No
don't
problem.
have a good memory. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes of 12/17. I wasn't here. Those of us that weren't on the committee obviously have to abstain, so a motion to approve those minutes if you've ever read them. Jamie, will these be put out before the meeting digitally?
Yeah, I try to submit, like I did for this meeting, one email about ahead that has all of the information that the committee generally is gonna have on their agenda, so that.
So you'll
includes-
have the minutes from the last meeting as well?
Yeah, but so usually I wait till a week before the next meeting to put them out.
No problem.
So I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from December 17th.
For the second?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Abstaining. Do you have the names? Do you know everybody, Jamie?
I do.
Well, that makes one of us.
We need name tags for this meeting, don't we?
Okay. Public comments, public speak. If you're here to speak to the football issue, that's gonna have its time, so anything else? Anybody else? Okay, good. Communication, city officials, account balances, open projects, correspondence. The only city official here that I'd like to hear from on those areas is Jamie.
Okay, I'll start with account balances.
Is that the thing you sent us in the mail, the one that has?
That's the proposed budget request for this CPA that has its own agenda item.
I apologize.
If we want to go through that now, we can.
No, that's a different agenda, so just let us know what.
So we're just at the account, generally, at this point in the meeting, in the past, we've just gone through the account balances and if there's
And
any.
you discussed them?
Yeah, I just get
Okay.
the numbers from the financial, from the
All right.
treasurer. So of the three set-asides, there's approximately $60,000 reserved for open space, $60,000 reserved for historic preservation, and $161,000, almost $162,000 reserved for affordable housing. There's $615,000 in the undesignated account, which is the money that's rolled over from all the prior fiscal years that hasn't been spent yet. And there's $266,000 in the reserve fund, which is this year's current, not purposed money.
It's $1 million.
Yeah, just 1.1.
Okay. Next meeting will be at the Waldorf.
There was a request, there was some
Is any of that money encumbered? with projects that are ongoing?
None of that money's been encumbered. The encumbered money is a
Separate item?
separate item. If you want to go through that, I can.
No, I just wanted to know if this is money that's free for the committee to deal with. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Um,
Anybody have a question?
And I don't know how familiar you guys are with how the CPA works, but those three, open space, historic preservation, affordable housing, have definitive reserve amounts every year, a minimum of 10%, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and we can go into that in more detail with the budget when we set what those are gonna be for the next fiscal year.
But that brings up a good point. For the new people, you understand the committee and what it does, where it gets its money from? You're all familiar? Okay, cool. Just want to make sure.
So, I did include, well, it's not an agenda item, I did include in the email, a copy of the preservation plan that the committee authored last year, and a copy of the draft rules of the committee, which actually is an agenda item, and it's drafted because the committee has never formally adopted them. Other communication, there's, the personnel department has a request for everyone to sign conflict of interest. It's a yearly thing. And if you want to sign off on it and leave the signed page with me, I will make sure that it gets to the personnel
I've already
department.
signed one, are you good, Bill?
I guess I have to do a new one?
I don't know, the people, most of the people on this committee are on other committees as well, and should have had to do it for another committee, but we got the packet and it had your names on it, so.
Okay. Sorry.
people have any else we do? Do we have another one for Scott?
I didn't see it.
Scott, because we're only.
Just
He
yesterday.
was appointed last night.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You'll get your information
Great.
when you go to do your official swearing. and everything for the
Got it.
Um,
So you want these to sign copies now?
If you want to leave them with me, I will make sure that they get to
Okay.
the right
Today's the
department.
21st. Jane, do you have anything else on open projects? Is there any open projects?
There aren't a number of open projects. Let me pull it up.
On this year?
Sure.
Currently, there are about 9 projects that currently have balances that are not fully expended. And starting with the oldest one, the Lower Mill Pond Park was approved. There were 2 appropriations, one in 2005 and one in 2007, for a total of about $150,000, which was matched by the state and other funding sources for about $250,000. There was almost $6,000 remaining in that project. It's under the direction of the Parks and Recreation Department through John Mason, is to use that money after the Pleasant Street Mills project is complete, to do more capital improvements to the park to bring it in line and with the back of the mill building. The town clock on the East Hampton Congregational Church was approved in 2008 for $35,000.
That's still ongoing?
Yes. There is
Been taken care of, believe me.
$5,300 remaining
Sore point.
in the budget for that item. There were originally planned a lot broader scope of work than could actually done with the money that was granted. It's a weird project where there was no project manager, or maybe the project manager was the former planning director who left. There's a volunteer who's the keeper of the town clock who does the maintenance on a volunteer basis. And the clock is running now, as everyone knows, and it's lit, but if you actually go up into the steeple, there are lots of cracks and holes in the face, and there are more repairs or restoration work that could be done. So the intent is to use that money to try to figure out exactly what needs to be done, to get a quote, cost estimates, and then come back to the CPA for the money to actually make the necessary repairs and restore the clock.
Are we assuming somebody at the Congregational Church is going to be sort of point person on that? going
I've
forward, do you
been
think?
trying to work with the Congregational Church and Jeffrey Tannett, who's the keeper of the clock, and trying to push that project forward. But
Okay.
Okay, good.
hasn't been very quick.
I don't think there's any statute of limitations on when that money has to be returned to the CPA. Is there a law that says?
There's no law, but last year, maybe 2 years ago, the committee started to do grant agreements, and when the funding goes to an agency outside of the city, that's when the grant agreement needs to be signed by the mayor and the organization that's doing the project. And typically that grant agreement stipulates that it's a 1 year to do the project, or
It gives it a timeline.
Yeah, and so that way, that since 2012, we haven't had the projects just keep going on and on and on.
Okay, well, when they come back for more money, I think we'll have a grant agreement.
Mhm.
I would recommend that. Anyway.
Oh, you can be pretty sure about that one.
Sounds like that's
Lead that charge.
Predates my being here. It's 2008.
In 2014, the White Brook Middle School football field construction project, there is still about $18,000 remaining in that line item.
What's it for?
I assume it's a contingency, or was a
Is that project complete?
payments that were waiting the final approval and sign off by the school. I don't know
I'm sure
what
it's-
that
Someone will be looking for it.
money is.
I didn't have that.
you know.
Is there a process for closing out projects? I mean,
So unfortunately, once the appropriation leaves the CPA, it's no longer, it's not the CPA's money anymore.
Sure.
So in this case, that money is in the school department's budget, and it's the school department's line item, so.
You better hope the superintendent doesn't hear about it.
I am hearing about it.
So
We're looking into
yeah.
that tomorrow.
So generally, what we do is, once we get notice that the project is complete, we ask for that group to return the money back to the CPA. But we haven't received the final notice that the project has actually been completed.
I guess my question is it typical to receive a notice that the project is complete?
again, that's part of the new grant agreement that we request.
Does that grant agreement include our city, like, this is a school,
Right,
Friends of Football is helping,
so
but that's a school
it doesn't,
department issue.
so in the grant agreement, it says that they have to, they turn in quarterly reports and a closeout report at the end of the project. We've asked city agencies to do that in a sort of letter that comes from the planning department on behalf of the CPA committee. Prior chairs had looked at that letter, and the committee looked at it and sort of gave the planning department the go-ahead to use that.
Okay.
And we ask for that stuff, but there's no teeth to it.
I'm gonna look into the law.
Um,
I can't believe the state wouldn't put something in the law that says you have to return your money if you don't use it after so long. I can't believe they didn't do something like that, but I'd like to find out. And what teeth we can put into it, because that's taxpayer money that we can use on this committee if it's not being used by whatever organization was supposed to use it, so I'd like to look into that.
I totally agree.
Okay.
The Old Town Hall, the improvements to the Old Town Hall, again funded in 2014. There's about $30,000 left in that project as well.
This
Again,
is the project to renovate the foyer,
the foyer
the
and
door,
doors.
entryway and doors at the old town hall.
My understanding is that there's some like punch list type details and things that they're still using that money for.
Okay.
The Manhan Rail Trail improvements, it was a $400,000 match to the Pleasant Street Mills $7.2 million project. There's that project's being run out of the planning department, and the intent was to use the non-city money first. So there's still about $360,000 left, which will go towards the improvements on the rail trail once the rest of the Pleasant Street project is complete. Brickyard Brook, Mutter Field, was approved earlier, 6 months ago, mid-2015. That project's for $185,000 of CPA money. There's still $83,000 left. I've been getting regular updates from them. They are doing the project as they proposed, and the grant agreement is working quite well. Nonotuck Park, the soccer field, there's about $1,500 left for the construction, which I assume is for punch list items to be finished up in the spring. And the final open project is the playground improvements at the Center Pepin School, which hasn't been used at all, and the entire $20,479 is unspent.
Is that because they haven't started that renovation?
I believe that the principal of the school left the
Yeah.
school shortly
Mhm.
after the appropriation was made by city council.
So maybe the new principal didn't understand that this was available.
Okay, this is
Look into
good.
that.
Can I ask you, everything you just said, can you provide a document, email it to all of us?
I will include it in the minutes and
I would like to know, like, the details of this money's still for punch list or something. That'd be great, because one of the things I will seek to do is pursue these projects. Why aren't they getting done? It seems to be communication gaps when they didn't know they had 18,000, and Nancy didn't know that that the playground hadn't been done yet because of something. So we need to fix that, I would think. Committee members, do you agree? We're granting money and it's not being used. And that's not the whole purpose of our being. Wow, okay.
And
And
I'd be happy to report back to you on what the status is of those funds that are remaining.
Could you tell us on the 18th, or you could email us all? I don't.
Certainly can.
Supposed to put a fence in for.
That was a fence.
Yeah.
was part
That's
of it.
right. I remember it was a fence
It was a
project.
fence issue, yeah.
Repair
We just
the
approved
fence,
it.
rebuild the fence.
yeah, it was approved in
But their
July-
contractor
July,
hadn't
August.
been engaged? I thought we had a quote. You
We
guys
had,
gave us.
we had 3 quotes.
I remember, because it comes to us, I get to see
You get the
these
whole
things
package,
twice. Okay. All right, let's find out about that, but I'd like to look into that Okay. 217 fiscal year budget. We got that budget request?
And actually, I have a slightly revised version.
Okay. Need one more. Is there another one down there?
It's coming around way, it looks like.
Oh, it's coming the other way, okay. I got one. Is it typical for the committee to approve this budget proposal? And then we send it off to the mayor and the treasurer?
Correct. So generally, in the past couple of years, what we've done, I've worked with the finance director and the auditor to get what we estimate the proposed budget should be based off of what the committee has expressed in the past. And provide the committee for comment and amendment, and then if it's fine as is, we can vote on it today. If there's any changes, I'll make correct those changes, and then provide a new update for the February meeting.
In my experience, it's been approved the following meeting, so it's presented.
We look at this,
we
and
look
then we
at
look
it,
at
we have
it.
time to digest it and discuss it, and it gets reintroduced at the next meeting in case there's, further discussion before potentially being approved next meeting.
So if you want, I can sort of walk you through it.
Please.
So it's a little complicated because we have to estimate the total amount of revenue that we expect to take in 2017. And that includes money from the state in the form of the annual match that we get. But we don't know what that match is going to be. And when you look at the historical matches, they've varied widely from year to year.
20% now?
So last year we got approximately a 51% match. The year before was 55. The year before was 90.
I'm reading this wrong, that's wrong.
There's a round 1 and there's a round 2 and 3, sort of initial amount, and it's usually followed up by a second.
So without knowing what those matches are going to be, we try to be very conservative with the amount of money that the CPA committee expects to take in, so that the budget is actually going to be smaller than what we expect to take in, so that even in a bad year, the committee won't be spending more money than we actually take in revenue when the year closes.
Just question on that. So that the way the law is written, it's not necessarily a one-to-one match on the tax surcharge. It's a pot that's divided up proportionally to.
Right.
Is that
So,
correct? Okay.
so the way the match comes from is every time that there's a filing at the Registry of Deeds, it's a $75 filing fee. $25 goes to the CPA trust fund, and that money is then split amongst all of the communities that have elected to that have taken on the extra CPA tax. Depending on the rate that the community has adopted it at, either 1%, 2%, or 3%, you either get just the round 1, or you get the round 1 and 2, or you get all 3 rounds. Because East Hampton elected to tax at the highest rate, East Hampton gets all 3 rounds of funding. But the extra rounds only happen if they have extra money after the first round. The past couple of years, there have been additional money put into the trust. After the fiscal year closes, the state legislature has put some amount of the surplus into that trust fund. So last year was $10 million, the year before was $25 million, and again, all of that is split amongst all the different communities. So this budget makes the assumption that we will that the city will take in tax revenue $395,000, which is about the adjusted budget for this year, the tax receipts, and we're expecting a 20% match on that, which would bring the total to $474,000. So that's what the budget is based off of, the 474. However, realistically, we know that money's that we're actually going to get more money than that through the second and third round and other interest, and will probably, the local taxes raised will actually probably be more than the 395, which is why the set-asides, which are 10%, are actually at $70,000 and not the $47,000 as would be 10% of the proposed budget. And again, so we estimate the amount of revenue low and put aside the set-asides a little bit higher when the budgets come in. If worst case scenario, the CPA sets aside more money for the 3 categories than they absolutely needed to. But since the committee can only spend for those projects anyways, it's not really that big a deal. If we do end up getting closer to $700,000 in revenue, as we did in fiscal year 2014, we won't have to go back and amend the budget. You can see that in 2014, the committee set aside $51,000 in each of the 3 set-asides. The total revenue was $714,000. So we were actually close to $20,000 short in each of the set-asides. But because of spending that the committee had done during that year that counted towards those set-asides, the committee didn't need to go back and readjust at the end of the year.
So what that means is, just so I understand it, 2014, $51,000 was set aside for open space. You might have an open space project that cost $200,000.
Mm-hmm.
Since we spent that money that year, 51 came out of there, and the rest, we met our obligation.
Exactly.
Since we met our obligation, doesn't matter how much we put in, even though it was less than the percentage the state wanted, we met our obligation, so the DOR is not going to be up on our case for that.
Exactly. So the requirement in the state law is that the committee spend or set aside 10% for each of those 3 categories in each fiscal year. So because we set the budget at the beginning of the year and we have the budget for those items, the committee historically has set it aside at the beginning of the year and then spends out of those accounts, and then once they hit 0, spends out of the undesignated account.
Mm-hmm.
Can you remind me the time frame for when we actually get more solid on the numbers? Because what we're saying essentially is we're going to budget at 12.5% because we feel that the amount that we're budgeting in revenue is conservative.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually going to be receiving more. That's what I'm hearing, right?
Right.
So when will we know, within some degree of certainty, what the actual amount will be? When does that usually happen during the year?
June 30.
Well,
For instance, do we know for fiscal year 16, with some degree of certainty, we know now,
we
right?
know with fiscal year 16 that the 394,717 is what the tax collectors have certified to DOR that they expect to take in and bill this year.
Right.
The reality is we're not going to get all of this year's taxes. Some people don't pay. Some people don't pay on time. We're also going to get prior years' late payments and penalties for people who are 2 or 3 years out of date, and that gets applied to this current fiscal year.
But within some reasonability, we had an idea for the property tax the CPA local tax portion when?
So that the 2016 numbers were just certified by DOR in late November.
And then what about the state match?
That we got for 2000. We got the 2015 match in November 2016.
We got it.
So we actually get the match the year
We got the
after.
fiscal year 15 in November of 15.
No, fiscal year 16.
So a year off with the match.
So these fiscal year 16 adjusted numbers for the CPA state match, where do those come from?
That was what we actually got from the state this year, the adjusted budget. It goes into this year's revenue.
So the
But it's
fiscal year
based-
16 numbers we have for the state match is what you're
Mhm.
saying. And when did we get those?
We got the match in November, but it was based off of 2015 receipts.
Okay, so typically in a cycle, then what we're saying is that by November, about, we have with some degree of certainty what the year's numbers are going to look like.
What the current year's gonna look like.
Correct. We're starting here in January. I just want to be kind of clear because I have to remind
No,
myself.
because
of
the fiscal year starts in July. So we've been operating from July 1st to November without knowing, without the budget being certified, without the tax receipts being certified by the DOR.
Correct. I'm with you.
Okay.
Okay. So anyhow, so
Go ahead.
anyhow, what we're basically, I think the issue before the committee is how we want to budget a little bit and whether we want to revisit the budget if for some reason we, if we want to stick with a 10% number based on our original budget and amend the budget later on based on what the actual numbers come in at, or be conservative and essentially set aside more than the 10%
Well, looking at
with the thought that it's going to go up.
the fact that we have $1 million in the bank right now, that's beyond this. This is what we might get this year. Am I understanding that right?
This is what we'll, 2017.
Right, revenue, but we have quite a bit of money already
Right.
in the bank for
Mhm.
projects.
Yes.
Undesignated.
Undesignated, well, we have 60K in open, 60, we have money in the designated spots too. So, my feeling is, this can be maintained so it matches the law. The law says we have to set it aside per year, 10%, we have to make sure we do that. But other than that, I'm not too worried if we have money from prior years in the bank. If we have a project before us and we need to spend money,
Mhm.
we know what kind of money we have. I mean, we're not operating just out of this year's budget, is what I'm saying. We're operating with knowledge that we have
Right.
savings account, basically. We have a lot of money in the other accounts,
Right.
account already, so, cool.
That's true.
I mean, I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is revenue and the way the budget should be distributed for this year's revenue.
Yeah.
Okay.
For
Makes sense to me.
for the next fiscal year.
Mhm.
So, and I guess the reason why I recommend that we don't go with just the lesser amount in each of the set-asides is because amending the budget later requires a approval, you have to have the motion from the committee,
City
and then have the
council,
city council
supplemental
hearing, and
appropriation.
supplemental appropriations, and that takes 2 months or something like that to do, so it's more, it's easier to do it all now.
Oh, it involves more than just the CPA committee, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, this budget is going to be approved late in this year, in June, when we normally approve, the city council approves the total budget. This is
Yes.
part of that budget.
Right.
Okay. So what this is like any other department, we have to submit it to the mayor and to the finance director, so they can include it in the general budget they submit to the council. Okay, no problem.
So if there are any comments or things that you want to see changed, I can come up with different versions of it or make different,
Why don't we
whatever.
absorb this and come back at the next meeting?
Yeah,
Do you have
can I just ask you a question, Jamie? Since the
Mhm.
first version had, what did it have, 80,000 or something like that?
Yeah.
You revised it, tell us the basis of the revision and what your thoughts were on that.
The first run was prior to a discussion I had with the city auditor, and I didn't have the estimated revenues for this year's. I had originally that we're gonna take in closer to $405,000 for tax revenue in FY17.
You mean 2016?
Sorry. Where's the- Yeah, there was more, the interest The interest and other revenue, my knowledge on that was incomplete. And
Okay.
I guess it was the 395 is still the same.
So you
And
base your,
after talking to the treasurer and the auditor, I had a better grasp on what we actually expected to bring in revenue, and the 82 seemed much higher than we actually needed, so that I revised it to the 12.5%.
Okay.
well, that's still above the 10% that we're supposed to do, so.
It's above the 10% of the conservative budget, or the conservative receipts, but it will be likely a few $1,000s more than what we actually take in, but we won't know that until this time next year.
All right, so I have a question. If our revenue, we have a conservative revenue picture now. If our revenue is a lot higher, let's say you estimated 500 total revenue, if I'm reading this right, 561,000 for next year.
Mm-hmm.
What if it comes in 600,000? Do we have to, and that means that we're
We would
below 10%.
No, we would still be okay.
We haven't spent, let's say we haven't spent any money on the other, any of the areas.
yeah.
Do we have to revise our budget?
It would have to be above 700,000.
Right.
To get the 10,
Right,
70,000.
right.
So,
You're right.
So even
but
if-
you don't anticipate. I mean, that you don't anticipate that it would be that high. Essentially, you're getting a number that you think is unlikely high to be able to.
We'd be so
Right.
happy we'd be willing to go back and
We'd be
revise the
figuring
budget.
But I
you know-
think we would have to, what I'm saying is legally we'd have to do it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, or we'd have to look and see where we sent, what projects were spent at, and we'd have to.
That's right, unless we
look
had
at.
spent it in those areas. It's not, in a given year, it's not always typical for us to spend the reserved amount for all three: open space, historic preservation.
Depends on the
affordable
project
housing.
going forward.
And you can see that in the money that's left aside from past fiscal years. We have about 60,000 in open space and historic preservation, and 161,000 for affordable housing.
Okay, so we'll approve this next meeting. Anybody else have anything else on the budget? Let's move on to committee rules, procedure discussion. Did you not have rules prior to this year? Or is this something you just want to approve every year, Jamie?
The committee has not had formal rules in the entire time that I've been working with the committee.
So what was the impetus for doing these rules?
Discussions with the committee at the end of the last, I guess the last year. There was a lot of turnover in membership, and
Did you base them on anybody else's rules?
they are based off of the city council's rules, or the, not rules, the ordinance that enables the CPA.
Okay.
And they're also based off of other rules that I've seen for like the planning board or zoning board of appeals in regard to some of the procedural stuff. The information that I had received from the city clerk was that unless a board or committee has adopted Robert's rules, there's no requirement to follow Robert's rules. So there's no mention of Robert's rules in this draft rules because the committee had never expressed an interest in
Formally adopting Robert's rules.
in using Robert's rules. Most of the boards and committees that I've seen function in the city don't follow Robert's rules. They follow some.
All the
loose-
council committees do.
Yeah, city council has adopted Robert's rules for all of its committees and hearings and everything. So if the committee wanted to adopt Robert's rules, then that would be fine, and we can.
I'm happy that we don't. We would if there ever became contention, and I would recognize that Robert's rules would help us to resolve conflict. But I'm not necessarily seeing that as necessary. You guys have been functioning pretty good without them. And I think these are fairly clear. A lot of it has, as she said, has to do with the ordinance that's written by the city and state law. We can't write a rule that overrides that ordinance or overrides the state law. We can't do that.
One note on quorum and action, section 4 there. Just looking at the bottom, that says a majority vote of the entire committee membership is required to approve anything.
And that's directly from the enabling legislation from the city.
So if you've got a quorum of 5, you essentially need a unanimous vote to carry an action.
That's from where is that from?
That's in the city's enabling legislation. That's what the city.
It says a
City's
majority
ordinance
vote of the
adopting
entire
CPA.
committee membership present and voting. See, that's what we just had this issue and we had to, actually was involved in rewriting the charter because the council did not have voting procedures which allowed for measures to be voted on with less than 5 members. So we passed a charter change that allowed that only a measure could be passed, ordinance, anything, by majority vote would be 5 members of the council, not 5 members of those present and voting. It used to be that if there was only 5 members there, 3 members of the council could vote in a major $1 million ordinance, and there's 9 of us elected, so that didn't sit well with the city, so we decided to change that. So I think what this means, and correct me if I'm wrong, to look at the ordinance, it means there has to be 5, let's see, there's 9 of us, there has to be 5 votes to pass anything. If there's 5 of us here, nobody can vote no or abstain, it doesn't pass.
Exactly.
Does everybody understand that? Is that what that's
Right,
what I'm
and
reading?
and that's based off of the city's legislation, enabling legislation, which is
Right.
based off of the state's enabling legislation, and it's actually very clear in both of those that it's the entire membership of the committee and not a majority of those present.
President and voting.
Yeah, so it doesn't, I mean,
Abstention is a
even,
non-vote.
even if there's only 6 members appointed to the committee, the membership is still the 9 members.
Right. That's important.
That's
too.
where the discussion came up, is because we've had vacancies on this committee before, and we've had multiple vacancies at the same time. So when you end up with the possibility of having only 7 or 6 active members on the committee,
And you still
or
need
God
5
forbid,
votes.
somebody then gets hit by a bus or whatever,
Mhm.
you know, and you end up with suddenly 5 and 1 is in California or something, you can't get anything done. Which is, it's just something for us to be aware of. It's one of the, but so, you know, the answer is yes, you have to have, if you have 5, it has to be unanimous. But that was something that I was unaware of until this discussion happened, whenever that was, John, like, December, or
But it's
it was last fall or
I
something.
hope you agree it's appropriate. There's 9 of us, or there's 9 members on the committee. We're passing legislation here or appropriation that might deal with hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think 5 of us have to say yes. I think that's appropriate.
The
That's
spirit,
what
the spirit of it
tax-
is definitely there, and I support it. I think it's just
It's
one of
good.
those things, and Jamie's aware of that we've had, at times vacancies and so forth, so.
And part of,
We're delightfully at a full attendance this evening. It's not always going to be that way. If I might suggest, just in the interest of time, I'd like to look more at the committee rules and procedures and have kind of more discussion on it. Maybe we can continue, I don't know, how would people feel if we
Yeah.
continue the conversation,
Table it to the next meeting.
table the next meeting? Does that sound?
Might I propose that, especially the new members, take a look at section 11, which is what we've been discussing, especially in the latest meetings.
Okay. Well, then we'll move on. I would like to state that we should vote these rules in at the next meeting. Take a look at them, digest them. I don't know how long I've had them for a week because Jamie just sent them out, so if that's all right.
Yeah, that works.
We'll do the budget and the rules next meeting. I want to do something now. We're going to get back to cost estimates and do everything else, but we have these kind people here waiting, and I'm going to just jump to the review of applications, the football field lighting, and the new members have to be caught up on that. So Jamie or members, if you want to discuss what that project entails and what you're requesting, we should do that now so that these kind of people can be done with us. Anybody want to review the project? I guess this was brought up at the last meeting. When was this
Yeah.
submitted, the last meeting?
Yeah,
Yeah.
before the last meeting.
If I understand it correctly, you want to start in the spring.
Yes.
So voting on this,
Would occur February.
are we looking at
For us.
voting on this today?
No, we have 4 periods that we can vote, that we've decided 4 times a year, so this would be decided on this committee.
Is that in the rules we just did?
I don't know if I saw it. Yeah,
Well,
there's
it's at the
mention
bottom
of
of
it.
the agenda. It
But
actually
I believe
has
it
the
is in the.
funding cycles and funding decision dates.
So we could
Yeah,
only,
Section 6.
Yeah, I think I saw it.
so
4 funding cycles per year.
when you say that, you mean, explain that again? We can only vote on projects
It's-
4 times a year?
It's not rigid, but the committee had adopted a quarterly basis for receiving and then funding at every third monthly meeting.
So quarterly?
Quarterly, yeah. But if an emergency
I didn't
came
know
up,
that.
we could
Right.
decide to
All right.
vote on that.
So
But
based
it's-
on that rule, we don't vote on this until February?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
because then it has to go to the council.
Right, so it's not just us, it's other things that have to happen.
But the only reason I bring it up is they're looking at springtime, so this may not happen in spring. It won't because of the timing of decision-making.
Well, there was a question at the last meeting, how long the project was gonna take.
Okay, why don't we go over
So,
the project?
yeah,
then?
yeah.
Yeah, I'd be
Now, would
glad
you
to
like
go over
Tom
it.
to-
Yes, Tom.
And my name is Tom Logan. I'm a volunteer with East Hampton Friends of Football Association. I've been having it for about 5 years or so. We, last year, we embarked upon a project to improve the field itself at the school. We had a lot of years, the drainage conditions were very difficult, to say the least. We couldn't grow good grass. It became a safety concern, mosquito-borne illness concern, all those things. A lot of people in the community worked very, very hard, and in our organization, through many volunteer efforts in the support of this board and the city to improve to what we believe is one of the best fields in the whole system of the football sports. And we're really quite proud of it. What we learn as time goes on is, we look at our competitors and the facilities that they're able to offer, and we look at our surrounding towns, and of course, you may have read East Hampton quite recently, actually, after our application, we've been elevated in their league play for the varsity football, so that they'll be playing, we now are the only team in the league without lights. So we've, through a volunteer basis, have worked with some contractors who are experts in providing lights for these type of facilities, talked with them about our facilities, and they're familiar with that. And they've given us an idea of what we should expect for costs related to installation of lights that will deliver safe levels of lighting for night varsity high school play. So we submitted our application, and we spent a lot of time evaluating the criteria required by this committee and how it fits into the master plan of the goals established by the CPA. We believe that we've addressed them. We discussed this at our last hearing, which was the first hearing after our application submittal. The results of those discussions prompted some good commentary and dialogue and back and forth, and Jamie had forwarded along the crux of the questions, the main questions that we went and did some homework on, and those questions included, the first one was a detailed timeline, and I provided a bit of a response and a printout that I think Jamie may have handed you. There was also a question.
Do we have a printout?
Yeah, there was something on the table there, some email that was printed out.
That's it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think
Did we get? You got it. It got passed around, but I'm not sure how many we had.
Well,
We had
sure.
enough.
We got that tonight?
Yeah,
It was
on the
sitting
table.
right here. Yeah.
I don't. I don't have that.
I
Is
have an
that-
extra copy, if you need,
Sure.
so everybody can look at it.
That's it.
Yeah, this is it.
But it's only one page, right?
Yeah, it's one page back
Front
and
and back.
front.
Okay.
The questions that we were asked to do a little research on included the timeline, project budget, the cost to run the lights, how long the lights come to full power, evaluating those pole locations versus, a possibility of perhaps in the future if one were to expand the track to a standard width. And I provide some answers. I thought we could go through those if you'd like. I'd be happy to. And the first one is related to the discussion we're just having regarding the timeline, and we're aware and now educated through the last project that there is real-time consideration. And, after, even if this board votes to approve, that I agree, we likely will not be digging in the spring, or if we do, it would be very, very late spring. And I think, if we're able to start construction at the beginning of June, I think that could be a reasonable expectation. 8 weeks after that would be in August, so I would, if we're able to follow that sort of a schedule, more or less, I think that we could be ready by the middle of August, beginning of September at the latest. And I think if you remember on our last project with the football field, this idea was contemplated, and I think it may have been a comment from this committee that we put a conduit under the 50-yard line of the field so that we don't have to go for a far run.
Right, I remember that.
So,
All right.
so we did that, and that's good, and the contractors reevaluated it and have confirmed that the conduit that there is adequate and sufficient to run the power that they need to cross the field. So that's what we're thinking timeline, and we know we don't live in a perfect world with these things, so we have to be diligent going forward. You always think you have more time than you do, but we think this is realistic.
I think if this is voted in February and it goes to the council in March, you'll get it in April.
Yeah,
I don't see any reason.
yeah.
We
It'd
have
be better yet.
strong support for the CPA and the council, so you should be able to. I think getting out to bid in May is realistic.
Okay.
I'm not positive, but.
Yeah, and we see it the same way, so we'd like to kind of pursue on that schedule. The next item was regarding detailed estimated project budget. I have a quote in hand from Musco Lighting, who is one of the premier providers of this type of lighting system. They actually are pre-approved by the state as a material vendor to provide. They provide safe lighting to the levels that are required, and we're looking at 30-foot candles, which would be consistent with high school football. We've also been in touch with a local electrical contractor who has given us an idea of the costs. They strike me as being knowledgeable about that facility and what it's going to take. When I add up the two costs, just over $150,000. We asked for less than $170,000 on this project because the fact of the matter is we don't always know what's going to happen in a competitive bid situation. And the last project, the football field project, more due to communication issues than anything else, we bumped into a number that we weren't expecting. So these are real numbers, and I haven't built any contingency into it. I wanted to be perfectly transparent about what I have, what we've asked for, and that there's some there, partially because I was still a little concerned about not, covering one thing or the other, or how these discussions evolve. And maybe, for instance, if we widen, if we were going to accommodate the widening of the track, we actually would have to plan on adding about $15,000 to this number, and that's addressed in the last comment at the end. So suddenly your $150,000 project is 165, and there's not. So we're right at that number. But I wanted to share that with you.
So these numbers are based on one quote for labor, one quote for materials, the total of which is 150?
More or less.
Did I just hear you say that part of the project includes widening the track, so it's not
No.
just lighting?
No.
Or you're talking about lighting the track?
No, I'll explain.
Okay.
The track that we have and that we've had at White Brook has been there for many years. And it's not standard width by any means. But, you know, in trying to plan this, one of the comments from one of the committee members was, if in the future the city chooses to widen that track to a standard width, would we have to move the poles?
Oh, there you go.
So, we went back to Musco and we said, you know, what would be a standard track for a high school? And they said, well, you know, because I think what people talk about a lot is a 6-lane track or an 8-lane track. And we said, well, let's look at the biggest one. And they said, well, you shouldn't look at the biggest one. UMass just put a track in and that's 6 lanes. An 8-lane track would be, you know, a monster. And in this setting, they wouldn't think it would, you know, be realistic. But we did look at a 6-lane track, and if we were to accommodate a 6-lane track, we'd have to pull the poles back, I think 4 feet each, 4 or 5 feet each. In order to still deliver the 30-foot candles in the field, we have to add a couple more lights, so it adds costs to the project. But it's completely doable.
So you're proposing that we do accommodate the possibility of expanding the track, and we put the poles in the right place and add extra lighting?
We could do that.
Is that?
You know, that's, it really wasn't on our radar when we applied for the project, but it's a good comment that came up, and we are prepared
Is
to.
that a comment from this committee?
Yes.
It came from this
Yeah.
committee. It was just sort of looking down the road, because
Makes
there've
sense.
been incremental improvements to this field, and obviously you're looking to make it more and more usable.
Well, it
So
makes
the question,
sense.
the question was, does putting these lights in prevent us from doing anything that we might want to do later on the line? And that was one of the thoughts, is that there is that track there if you actually at some point wanted to make it a usable track rather than a dirt track or something like that. And, that could be used for competition or hosting events at on the high school level or middle school level. Would we be able to do that? And it sounds like we could do a 4-lane maybe with the current, but if we wanted to have a 6-lane track, which might be more typical for a high school, I don't really, you know, then we'd have to accommodate with different lighting setup.
Yeah,
So,
and it.
do we? I don't even know. Do we have? Is there a track program at the high
We
school?
don't
or
have a
anything like that?
track team at the present time. We often have people who would like to see us start a track program. I mean, personally, as the athletic director, I would think that we would want to work that into this project, because I think I think just being prepared for that possibility would be wise, instead of saying, well, now we can't build a track because we're not going to move the lights, and we're not going to, I don't think, find another place to put a track in.
And I think as a school department, it is something we'd like to pursue, is to have a track program. We give more opportunities for our students. It also could be something that would be accessible and available to the community, a track.
How do you know, like other districts in the area? Is it pretty common to have a track program? I mean,
Hampshire
has
I know
one.
Northampton,
Yes.
I guess, does, but
Yes.
Well, you would have competitors if you should.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes.
And you
Track and
probably have
field.
students that who compete in track who go to Hampshire because they can't do it in East Hampton, so they school out to Hampshire.
So,
Or Northampton.
just to review, 150 for the current project, another 15 grand, did I hear you say, if we're gonna move the lights back and add more lighting for possible track? Is that what you're saying?
I think it'll be under $15,000.
So we're up at 165 possibly, so that leaves you 5,000 contingency based on your appropriation requests.
Yeah.
Is that scary?
We did
Well,
the field with
it's,
nothing contingency, so.
Okay.
Well, it's more scary than not approving an additional $15,000 to cover this.
Well, I think that's wise, I agree with the committee, that's wise. What, is there any match, I was gonna ask this, I think you, Friends of Football matched the field renovation before. Is there any match, is there any, I know this is gonna come up at the Finance Committee.
Right.
Is there any money coming from Friends of Football to be included in your overall budget?
You know, there are no funds, per se. At the last meeting, I explained that we budget between $5,000 and $8,000 a year to maintain the football field that's there. We put in the $20,000 towards the field. We put in $18,000 in a new scoreboard. We pay for the striping. We pay for the new helmets that they need, the uniforms this year. So while there's no actual cash amount, there is a fair amount in kind, and I can certainly
Okay, no, that,
have that figure, but it's upwards of 10 to 15. Well, I mean, this year alone it was,
Friends of Football provides a
40,000?
tremendous amount of support to the football program. I honestly could say that if we didn't have the support of Friends of Football, we would struggle to keep a program together.
I think,
It's been a
personally, I
long
think
time.
in-kind contribution is valuable. It's not monetary, but it's valuable. How does the committee feel? I'm curious about this because Dan Hagan used to bring it up, that there's a match or there's not a match from some kind of application. How does the committee feel when you don't have money being contributed by the applicants?
We prefer to have a match. I think we've had these discussions. We prefer them to find some state funding or some grant or something that
Them
helps
being
our money
some
go
other
further.
application,
Right.
yes. But in this case, personally, I don't have a problem with no match. What I like to see is this money leveraging a grant. So if there's $1 million grant,
Correct.
like
Right.
we get this money, the money we give helps them get that.
And I think that's what we were talking about, is always trying to get, is there some state money out there that we can leverage so our money goes further?
Okay, but in this case, does anybody have any issue about that? Because I feel it's not an issue for me.
No.
I just had a question. I mean, it seems pretty clear that Friends of Football has put in a lot of time and money. I mean, that's and drawn a lot from the community. Has there been exploration of like grants beyond? You know, it seems like there potentially be like grants for cities to upgrade athletic facilities, that sort of thing.
I'll let you.
Yeah, a lot. And we've actually hired people in the past to look for grants for us. We scan these things. We're a member of the USA Football. And really, what we end up finding is that although there's money available, it's not typically available for a smaller market like ours in more of a suburban sort of setting. In other words, they may like to give money to downtown Philadelphia or Chicago or city,
Closer to
city
Boston.
kind of, or more urban inner city, bigger market, higher publicity kind of.
And I believe some are basically that Innies were considered not a needy enough community, is kind of where.
A number of grants are based on low-income populations across the board, not just for athletics.
But that's
Improving
important to hear.
access
You
to
tried to
sports.
get grants, you just don't qualify for it.
Okay.
You were gonna continue the
Sure.
cost of the lights per year, I guess?
Did some research, contacted Eversource and also Musco. Figured they would know what it costs to run lights like this. And Eversource did a little bit of research based, of course, it's based upon whatever contract it might have with the city, peak hours, how much do they already buy. Kind of coupled that with the information I got from Musco and boiled it all down, and it seems like you're right around $5 an hour to run lights like these. I gave a range, that's what I had gotten. I put in a guess for how many games a year we might have, how many hours per game. If the teams progress through the playoffs, might want to have, we can't practice, or we don't want to be practicing on this field because that's how you damage your fields. But sometimes at the end of the season, when you turn the clocks back and if you're advancing in the playoffs, you need to have practice. So I added some time in there, and we're in the matter of I think, less than a couple $100 a year. And even if I'm off 100%, it's still a few $100 a year.
Is that absorbed by the athletic department's budget? Based on
And no,
like
probably the school department.
School department's,
However, and I don't know if it's in there, because I read it a while ago, the anticipation is if we have Friday night games, the gate will at least increase by that much. I mean, games now are not.
that goes back into the school
That goes
department's
back to
budget.
the athletic
Your
department,
budget,
yeah.
so you're gonna help pay for the lights.
Right, so.
$200 isn't much money.
No, I would actually hope that you would have more usage than 3 nights in a single season, just for the record. I mean, if we're looking at putting lights in, maybe we'll have a lifespan of 20 functional years. That's 60 nights that you're going to use. And so for $170,000 project for 60 nights, that's like $3,000 a night.
Well,
Just for usage, for perspective.
Sure.
So I just want to say from my perspective, I do hope that this encourages further use of the field beyond 3 home games in a year.
yeah.
Well,
we
it
added
is a big
JV
project. It's a
games.
lot of money from the
Yeah.
taxpayers here. So
Right.
Right, and actually, sorry, I do want to just speak to that. We likely will have 4 regular season games, and then we'll likely have 2 to 3 postseason games, including, and then in addition to that,
JV games.
our JV program, they would normally not use lights, but once there's the time change, we would have to turn them on halfway through the game to get the whole game in.
Do you ever let soccer use it? I've been to soccer games.
Yeah.
Before we had football, we only had soccer.
I think that once the project is complete, we would want to, assess what other uses we could utilize the lights. I'm sure that we would want to, as the school department, be open
Listen
to
to
the
that.
community having access to the lights and the field, as long as it's being used in an appropriate.
We also have to, overuse is how you kill a field as well. So if you are playing game after game after game after game after game, then all the money that was spent on building that field is for naught, because you've just destroyed your field. So, and that's something we're all really.
Right, and
the
additionally,
practices
I
are going to
think-
be in this field.
No, they don't
No.
practice on it.
No.
Only
So-
at night if they, in the late fall, when the lights change, if they have to, they may move over there, but we don't practice on the field.
So what would designate overuse of a field? Is there a rough idea? I mean, is it hours? Do you measure it in hours? Do you measure it in?
Well,
I
If
can
you're not
tell-
practicing on the field, I can't imagine there would be
Okay, we-
a ton of
Well, you have
Right.
10 football games a year. How many football games do you play regular season?
Well, and then the
Youth use it
suburban
as well.
Teams use it as well on the weekends.
So they
Really?
have,
Yes.
they have,
So that we're talking about the youth games.
So you got 2 suburban teams, right?
3.
You got 3.
So there's 3 suburban teams and they play 4 home games. So 4, 3, 12.
yep.
And you got this JV team that's just got to play another 4 or 5 games at home, right? Varsity, so.
3 or 4 home games.
Most of
You're looking
the
at 25 games a year,
incremental
roughly?
bump in usage though is not evening hour. Like this is not going to increase. My understanding at least is
Correct.
this is for
Either the
like
game's
Friday
played
night
in the afternoon
games
or it's
more
played at
than-
night. It's still
Right.
gonna be one
It's still
game.
field
Yeah.
usage though.
Yeah, we're already whether we put the lights in or not.
Harry has a
We're
question.
going to have a lot of use on.
You guys ever look into temporary lighting?
Not really.
Never
Maybe
did?
to rent it or something?
Yeah.
Portables.
I'm not sure. No, we didn't. I know you, Matt. We had some temporary lights down there this year when the youth programs were going to the Super Bowl and we had practice there late. But they run on gas and they were portable lights. And I'm not convinced we're able to deliver what I would consider minimum safe lighting standards. You know, these are designed by professional companies that do this for a living. They're hardwired in. They're time tested in being able to deliver a safe level of lights. So I'm unfamiliar with setting up temporary lights for a competitive situation.
I mean, that's an interesting, I mean, it's like, the 3 nights, I mean, I think it is tricky with 3 nights a year, right, when you're looking at, you know, it does seem like a big appropriation for 3 nights a year, or 4 nights, 4 or 5 nights, and, I mean, even just to get like a number like, or an estimate like that, to know, okay, are there other alternatives to play night games? I don't know what that would look like.
You know, and not to get off track on that, but, you know, I think there's an overall value add to this project, and I think it started with rebuilding the field. This is the next step. I think there are other improvements that can be made that will increase the quality of the program we're offering in the town for the suburban leagues as well as for the high school. I mean, you know, we go to a lot, obviously I've been to a lot of games at a lot of other schools, and, you know, what we see are, you know, fields that are lit with, you know, substantial seating for, you know, hundreds of people. We as a community, I feel pretty strongly, is that we need to sort of up our game. There's a lot of expectations for our athletics programs, yet there seems to be, at times, not a great deal of commitment or financial commitment from the city to help with that, and so we are.
I absolutely totally disagree. We just spent almost $600,000 on between the football field and the soccer field and the baseball field. We spent a lot of money.
Right.
So don't go tell me we're not committed.
No, that's not. That's not what I'm saying. But these things were relatively new. These all happened in the last 2 years, and this is building on those improvements and giving, you know, our programs a higher quality and a higher visibility. And I think that has to be considered. And in terms of, you know, what we're using, how often we're using the lights, well, you know, if we do put in a track, if we, you know, if we have opportunities for the middle school to use the track or the field in the evening, you know, I think that there are definitely benefits that we can assess whether it's appropriate to use the field for certain things. We, you know, our soccer program, we pay Williston quite a bit of money.
That's what I was actually just getting at. So soccer right now plays at Williston, is that?
No, we do. We have our senior nights there.
Okay.
We don't do any other night games there. If the soccer boosters want to do a night game outside of those senior nights, then they'll subsidize that. So again, I think there's things we can look at, and we have to assess whether it makes sense to use the field for those things.
Well, I would hope that you would consider soccer as well, because that makes, I think, what I'm hearing from the committee is, you know, let's use this if we're going to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I've been to, as I said, we didn't have football when my kids were young. I've been to a lot of games at night, and they're attractive. So why not? A couple games for soccer, 3 or 4 games for football, that makes it more reasonable. I know you're worried about field usage, but that also provides a wider range of kids using it, not just football. And you know, a track might happen and other things. So just a thought.
If I could just say, you know, we will consider all options, but I think what we're hearing tonight is that we need to let our experts think about, you know, how best to use the field so we maintain this wonderful field that we have. The other thing I want to say is that I believe that having the lights on the football field is also going to bring more community to these games and really be an asset to our entire community. And it is important for us to remain as a school district and as a community, competitive with our neighboring communities. If we are the only community without lights on a football field, we're going to be at a disadvantage. We are at a disadvantage. And we want, to be proud of our school district. We want to be proud of our community. We are. And we want to keep it that way. So this just seems to me to be a very positive move for the community and for our school department, certainly for our athletic program.
Well, I just want to say that my comment really was meant as encouragement for using the lights to, not to disparage the project or say that it's not a worthy project. I'm sort of fully behind this. I think it's going to be great for the community. I think there are going to be a lot of intangible benefits for having these games under the lights, and potentially starting something that's a real tradition here in the city of, having a game under the lights that people can go and enjoy.
I think so.
There's more adults available at night because they're at work. And Saturday afternoons is tough to get people to, so I think it's
just going to continue to build this wonderful community spirit we have in East Hampton.
Yeah, I think my comment just came from the logic behind the energy use for 3 nights. It just seemed a little bit.
Even if the energy use goes up to $400.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not a lot of money.
I think you're going to cover it with the gate and so forth, but just it seemed like hopefully you would be using it more than 3 nights in a given year is what we're talking about. So, and I anticipate that will be the case.
Let's continue. You have the next statement is estimate how long the lights take to come to full power. Where was that an issue? You guys have an issue with it?
Somebody asked.
So we found out.
So when we lose power, we get them back in 10 minutes like it happened in, what was it, the Super Bowl?
I think part of the conversation was, do they have to run for an hour or so before they're up and going? And is it a waste of energy? And we don't think that it's an issue.
And the next comment, light pole designed to accommodate future bleachers and stuff?
Yeah, we
And the track, we talked about the track already.
Yeah, those were two separate issues.
Okay.
We talked about the track and then bleachers. We had a conversation about, is the next logical step bleachers. It's probably the weakest response I was able to research, because what I determined about researching bleachers for a field like this, we're unique the way we're set up, the way our snack shack is in the middle of the field. So I think we would need kind of more committee and more meetings to discuss how many bleachers, how big, and exactly where, and then is it more of a master planning of the whole facility to have one continuous set of bleachers, like if you can imagine, Northampton High, something like that. But
if I remember correctly, the context for it was also, does it make sense to wrap this, to include the bleachers with this project? And I think where we left it was,
there's going to be no cost savings to do that.
There's no cost savings in incorporating the bleachers with the lighting, and that if it's, so we're just going to separate it. So I don't think, I don't know, I think we can move on from the bleachers.
All right, no problem, but just since I did the work, we found a couple sets of bleachers. They would each cost about $15,000. They would each support, I think, 184 spectators, and we had one on each side. I think you'd want to put probably concrete or something underneath, not only for grass, but for picking up trash after the games and stuff. So that's where I arrived at the $60,000 number. We can go much higher than that. We could probably come in, it's all we end up.
But that seems to be something for a future request. It has nothing to do with this request, except that you're making sure the light poles are in the right place. Am I understanding?
Yeah, and that's what.
Okay, so you're okay with where the light poles are. I mean, that's.
And it's not like you're gonna save money with, like, just say the fact you're gonna pour a pad of concrete, but you've already got the concrete guy there for the lights. It's not like it's gonna be a significant
There's no
savings.
savings.
Well, actually, these lights have precast foundation bases. I sold them, but that's
There are some contractors who do, soup to nuts athletic field renovations, and so, it may not be significant, but there may be some savings there in having it done all by one contractor. I know some of the colleges around here have hired a single contractor to do everything from resodding the field, putting in the track, putting in lights, redoing the bleachers. So
Unfortunately, we can't fund. Well, we're not doing that. Right. We're not doing a soup to nuts thing. We're doing it as much as we can, little by little. I have 2 big questions. Nancy, maybe you can answer this. Have we worried about abutters? I know it's deep in the field, but that's a lot of light. And remember we were talking about lights over on Bailey, near where the old high school was, and
Yes,
we had a huge
exactly.
issue there. So are you worried about that? Do we need to let people know that this is gonna be there Friday night?
We certainly would need to let any possible abutters, but as you say, it's deep in the field, so I don't think
I don't think it's that bad.
that it's really close to any residents. I mean, there's tree house,
Just
but
the
that's
people
I
on
would
the
think
other side.
traffic and noise would be more of an issue than
Yeah,
almost
that's
for
the
the
other
neighbors
thing.
than light, but
Yeah.
just for the Friday nights and everything. But.
Yeah.
I don't know what you can do about that. What about night security?
Well, go ahead.
Have you looked into that?
We're required to have a police detail at all our football games, regardless of what time of day.
Does that have to be increased because it's at night now?
I have to look at that, but I don't think it's a requirement. I think it's something we would
Work with the
potentially
police
consider.
department on.
I think you ought to. That concerns me because, well, I know Wilson has night games, but they're kind of fenced in. We have open woods behind us and everything, so. It's just something that came to me. I don't know, does anybody, is that ridiculous? Security, is it?
No, a lot of free
It's a
games.
reasonable question.
I would never pay. If I was a kid, I would never pay.
I know, we would love a
Wanna
fence.
sneak in through the woods?
Well,
Yeah. We would love a fence because not only do they come in through the woods, but they come around the backside of the school and you just watch them walk down the hill.
But they actually do the same thing at Williston.
They do it the same thing at Williston as well.
All I'm saying is, I'd like the school department to really look into that and get police. I'd like to hear that, what you think, what they think about this. I have no problem with night games, and I'm sure that's not gonna impound it, but it may mean more budget for more security. I don't know.
Yeah, we work with the police department on all security issues, so, a good point, and we would work with them on this as well.
Are there any other
I
questions?
just have a quick one, I'm sorry. So if you're talking about abutters, would you have to have some kind of an open general meeting to allow people to?
I don't think it's required. I'm just saying as a courtesy.
Mhm.
But there's only a couple of abutters at the top of White Brook, the driveway.
Right.
It's really not, there's hardly anything.
So you've got the
The
people in the
closest
treehouse.
abutter is up here.
It's a pretty nice location as far
Yeah.
as
You're
it
perfect.
being
I-
set back
Very
in the
nice.
woods and everything. So
It just came to me because I know we were talking about lights on Daly and then all of a sudden
Yeah,
said,
I
oh
know
boy,
Daly's
that
in the-
created huge firestorms.
Well, at the new high school, we had issues with that, but as you say, I don't think there are
Your
butters
butters
that are
didn't like
close
the high
enough.
school.
that,
Well, that's another question. I
Put
didn't
in
say
a lot of
that.
accommodations to try to keep everybody happy.
Any other questions on this? Because I know we're not voting on it tonight.
Just to go back real quick, just to clarify, I mean, I'm a big supporter of sports in the community and how that can be a rallying cry. And I also, I remember, as a kid playing sports, I played baseball, and playing under the lights was a really special thing. And I love, I remember that. I remember feeling that thrill of being able to play under the lights. I would love to see, and I'd love to see even before voting on it, some idea of potential, expanded uses for the field with the lights. And part of that too is to open that up to girls. Just having spending this money to have a lit field and not having anything planned, that we're doing this, appropriating it with a benefit only towards boys sports.
Well, there's
So-
cheerleading.
Okay.
There's also girls soccer.
I'd like to, so it would be helpful for me in being able to vote on that, to have a thought out plan of okay, we're gonna have this many football games lit, but we're also gonna, have whatever it is, this and this in the spring, and this in the fall, and then potentially spring sports that would be underneath there to feel like this is having a broader benefit. Is that something? I don't know if that's something that's possible to, in the next.
You'd like some report out on that? Before
Yeah,
the next
and
meeting?
it's just to have them the right to have that thought out.
Yeah, right now our only spring sports at the high school are softball and baseball, and those would not
That's it,
obviously
okay.
be played on there. We are considering starting a lacrosse club for girls. And there's a whole so some of these things they can't happen right away. To start a new sport is a good 2 to 3 year
Sure.
timeline.
But we do
So-
have plans, and I think that that's important, and,
Yeah,
and
I
we
mean,
can do much more, you know, with a lighted field.
Sure.
You know, we've been talking with Patty about, I've been talking with her, I think we do need more sports, so we need more sports for girls, and I think there are more sports that we can put in, and she's been talking with the middle school principal about some clubs, you know, club teams to start with. So, you know, we've got all kinds of ideas, and I think that this new facility would really help to support. And I agree with you. We need more sports for girls and more sports in general. I think track would be wonderful. Yeah, so I think there are lots of options.
Unfortunately, I think Nancy will agree, school choice does look at athletics. Parents look at athletics. If
That's
their
true.
kids are involved in athletics.
And
It's
the
unfortunate.
reality too is it's not just you know, you've got younger siblings, you've got families that are going potentially to football games, and they're aware of the experience of going to a Friday night football game under the lights, and even looking forward to their kid going to high school and being able to play here under the lights. And that may be just a deterrent for a couple families in choicing out to another school district.
I think
So-
football probably has brought kids into the school. In fact,
It
if you
does, and
haven't-
I think it helps to keep our students in our schools. And I
There's a
think you're
spirit element. There's,
absolutely right.
but and
Exactly.
it's not just in the high school and for the families that are currently in the high school.
That's
I mean, I
right.
know, you know, whatever, my kids aren't at that level, but we would certainly be interested in going out on a Friday and enjoying
Great
that experience,
family
right? So,
activity.
so you know, I think there are other younger families and so forth that, if the magic is there, that it helps them feel good about their community and consider keeping their kids in.
And this program is considerably younger than most, like Northampton's got generations of kids that have played. Young dad played and grandpa played. That's 15 years old, this program approximately. So this is a perfect time to start. We're now having kids that have played who graduated a few years ago, and you know, they're starting to get married and such. So this is the perfect time to just sort of kind of keep going with that. There aren't any legacies yet, but you know, we soon will hopefully have legacy players.
Any other questions? Just getting late, I want to make sure we've gotten this one done. This is the only project before us, right, Jamie? Okay.
One last thing, just, and part of this is just coming out of the current climate, and you know what we're reading about football. Has there been any effect? And I mean, and I say this as someone who enjoys watching football, you know, like, but you know, everything you read about concussions, like, has that affected the program at all with participation or with parents' concern or anything?
I'll let our athletic director address that.
Well, and on a youth level, I could say it has not. If anything, it's helped us be better prepared. All of our coaches, we're a heads up certified program. So all of our youth coaches must be certified in heads up, which is through the USA football program. So they teach kids from 3rd grade up how to tackle correctly. So they're not ramming and they're not, you know, getting that. So if anything, I think it has brought awareness, and it's kept us on our toes. You know, we definitely are much more aware of it. People they ask, they know, they see what we do, and know it. We really have not seen any kind of dip in our numbers because of it.
And at the high school, we have seen, for East Hampton, because our program is a co-op program.
Right.
So we've actually seen an uptick in the number of East Hampton students participating in football. And additionally, we do concussion training every year with all our families. And I bring in medical professionals to do it, and as they will remind every single fall that girls soccer has the highest number of concussions, well above football in youth and high school sports.
About boys soccer?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Girls soccer is number 1.
Wow.
Yeah.
Girls are tough.
Yeah.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Anything else on this, guys? Okay, well, thank you. I guess based on their protocol, we'll vote next meeting. Is that typically what we do? We vote
That
on
sounds
the
good.
February
Yep.
meeting? So we
Thank
skipped
you for your
over,
time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jamie,
Thank you. Good night.
we skipped over cost estimates and changes to approved projects discussion. I think you kind of went over that on the agenda, so it's, if you would hand out that ongoing project and everything that you talked about, I'd like to see that get to the committee, so we know where the money is and who's using it and what's going on.
Yep, so like I said, I will include those open projects in the minutes for the next meeting. The cost estimates and changes to approve projects discussion was something that was initiated out of sort of disappointment with how a couple projects were handled after they left the committee, and through that process, the committee asked me to try to trace through what the process was for funds and appropriations and who's responsible at what points in times, and so that's the flow chart that was in the packet. There was also this idea that the committee wanted to put conditions or stipulations on funding, maybe that there was a boilerplate boilerplate condition of, you know, if a group comes to the committee and says a project's going to cost $10,000, and then once it gets to city council, it's now ballooned to $20,000, that the committee would want to review it, and we were trying to figure out.
No, it can't.
Well, since this was the discussion.
I think the language is a little bit strong. We have no teeth to require anything, but we wanted to be aware of and recommend that if for some reason you had a project that was substantially way beyond what we approved in this committee, that there would be some either communication or review process, because, you know, here we are approving projects at a certain level, and it's one thing if it goes up by 10%, but it's another thing if it ends up being another 50 or 100% higher than the amount that we approved.
But they have to come back to the committee for additional funding. The council can't add money to the appropriation. If you approve 10,000,
this was
it becomes
the school,
20.
What was the context for this conversation? This was
Football
the football field.
Yeah.
So there was something, and I don't remember all the details. It went to this.
We appropriated $300,000, and apparently the bids came in at $600,000, something along those lines.
But
and that kind of, and it wasn't, and I'll speak for myself, it wasn't the fact that the bids came in at $600,000, it was the fact that apparently the project was going on, and we never realized, we don't know whether they cut anything out, whether they, you know, we don't know what happened.
So we thought they may have changed the scope of the project based on this, well, what they told us was going to happen was going to cost $600,000. Now they've only spent $300,000 that we gave them. What did they take out of the project to get it to $300,000?
That was more of an informational.
in other words, you want an audit of the project so that you know what the money was spent for and why did it cost $600,000 when you told us it was $300,000.
Right. We want to know what they took out.
And we don't have any teeth to ask for that.
Right.
I would bet we could add that. Any proposal, whether it goes with city agency or not, we have the right to ask for an audit of the project, ongoing project. And I'm surprised to hear, like, with the clock and with the football program and the fence, that the money isn't even being spent. And you guys didn't even know that, or maybe you did, I didn't know that. Because I vote on it and the city council votes on it. And I think that audit is appropriate. And I don't think I guess we have to investigate it legally, whether we can require that, but I think we should require it. That's part of it, that they have to come back periodically, quarterly, or within the project scope. How's it going? Well, we had to spend another $100,000, and, well, they didn't come back to us for the money. Where'd they get the money? But if the project scope changes, and you voted on a scope of a project, that makes sense to me, that you would want to know.
That's what, and that's
So
really
that-
was,
right,
we
and
thought
so
something was going to cut out.
And that's
Or
sort of
prove X
where-
and suddenly the project is Y, or, you know,
And I
XY
think,
or something.
well,
So-
again, my own perspective wasn't even the fact that happened, it was the fact that no one said anything. It was like, the project was still going on, but we had no idea what happened, you know.
What changed?
What changed, there was no communication.
And what bothers me about that, too, is you appropriate $300,000. Suddenly they decide that it has to be $400,000 or $500,000. They come back to us, oh, we've started the project, we got holes in the ground, you gotta give us the other $200,000.
Well, and that was
so
what-
that you get hostaged to make that happen.
That's why we did.
So I guess we need Jamie to find out, and I guess you could research this, if we can put language in any appropriation request that, number one, it's audited, number two, if the scope of the project changes in any way, they must come back to the committee, even if they're not asking for more money.
So what?
I don't know if we can do that, but I'd
Well,
like.
the committee prior to this month, we had gone through and discussed this a bunch, and there was a handout that I included that it had like a
Oh, I probably didn't print it. Yeah, okay. So you got something that does
we
that?
wrote something out.
let me see if I can.
I think the
If I
takeaway
may-
is that this is something that is unresolved here in this
No,
committee,
not
and that
that
we'd
one.
like to
It was-
discuss and figure out what makes the most sense.
Well, we're about to approve
This
the
one.
project. We can
This
start
one.
from this day
If you want.
forward.
Yes, so that was in the.
And so that was something that the committee can use to
Oh, yeah.
to write down what the things are that are important. So, let's say for this football program, each member or the committee would create one sheet that says, here's what we think the scope is, here's what we think the condition, here's what we think we're getting for the money.
Mhm.
So that way when the appropriation request goes to council, it's not just money for this program, but it's money for this program to do these specific things that has this condition and that condition.
Right.
So that way the council is aware of what the conditions are, that the public's aware of what the project is, and that all these things get transferred along. The problem in the past has been that the appropriation request has really just been,
We approve.
well,
here's
it's
the money.
been a little bit more than that, but
Yeah.
for
Well,
like
I've seen
soccer-
specificity when I got it in my
Right, yeah,
committee,
yeah.
the specificity of the project, but what I'm looking at is a boilerplate language that says if the scope of this project changes in any way, you must come back to the committee. Whether or not you're asking for more money, we'd like to know why and et cetera. Whether we can ask that, I think we can.
I think we can ask.
Well, so
And secondly,
we
if-
do have that in the grant agreements that we use for agencies outside the city. We do specifically say that the scope cannot change, and that if you use money that has in a way that hasn't been approved by the committee or as funded as the scope was funded, that we can we can go back and try to get that money back from you. That there is language in there that's been through the mayor and through the city solicitor that gives the city teeth, but we don't
I'd
have
like
that.
that, and I'd like an audit after the fact too.
And we have that ability in the language too, that the CPA committee or its designee can go to their office, go through their records regarding the.
Would that be you, Jamie, the designee?
I mean, it is
I mean,
generally, but it could be anybody in the city. It could be someone else. You could have a outside auditor that the CPA committee hires to audit every project every year.
Well, the taxpayers deserve that. We need to make sure that the money's being spent on what they spent it on. And I think they need to come back to the committee. I'd like to see that in our projects.
I support the boilerplate language too. I think that's a good idea.
Right.
It's
So
always on
it
every
was really
project.
just a question of
And I
what
don't
is
see
that
why
board-
it's just outside agencies. We should tell the school department, we'd like to know how you're spending the money. Why not?
The gist was to make sure too that they were aware of that in advance, that they knew that when we make the approval, that we expect that the scope doesn't change. And if it does, then they need to come back and make their case for the change.
It ought to be easier within the city, because if they're making a change to a city-run project, there's going to be a request for a change order. So every time someone comes in requesting a change order, you got to notify us.
Right.
Well, so it's harder
That-
actually with
with
the
our
city
committee setup,
because
that'd
because when it's an outside agency, the way we do payments is we make the applicant pay for a thing and seek a reimbursement from us. So we will only pay their bills once we've gotten proof that it's been installed and completed as it's supposed to be done, as the committee doesn't. And so I will go to a site to visit it, or they'll submit photos that show that they've done the work as they've requested. The contractor is submitting an invoice to them for the cost that they're invoicing us for. They're including a copy of their canceled check. So there's a clear
Money
trail and audit, and they don't get paid if they're not doing it in accordance with what they said they were going to do. But with city projects, once that money gets moved from once the city council makes the appropriation, it goes into that department's budget, and it's outside of the CPA. with the outsider grant, the money actually stays in the CPA accounts.
Well, I could still request it, they may not have a legal obligation to
Right.
provide it, but we could request. And again, I'm worried about the little hole that begins to create if the project expands and they come back to us for more money, and if we don't get the money, we can't finish the project. How the economy, that doesn't make, okay, well, I agree.
And we were also trying to catch things like if what our understanding was that it was for, let's say, accessibility, that then that might not change the amount of money, but if the money didn't go towards that, then that triggers the condition that we feel like, you need to come back and make your case. You can't say that, well, for $400,000, this is going to make the trail accessible, and then shift the money around.
Well, I think that kind of an audit is appropriate. In other words, at the end of the project, or in the middle of the project and at the end of the project, they have to come back and say what they did, and so that we know the money was spent appropriately. I mean, a report, something like that. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, you guys want to?
Nice, that's what we want to
I think we have projects that we approve here that are of orders of magnitude difference in size and scope and dollar amount. So for these, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars for some project. I think that is absolutely, it makes a ton of sense when you have a project that maybe like whatever, a handicap ramp where it's $5,000 or something like that. I mean, I think it's still nice to know that the project is complete. I'd like to see some sort of closure, some sort of closing the loop on it. I don't know whether it needs to be the exact same for all of the projects, as far as a report or something like that. I don't know. I'm open to ideas.
The example of the football field, what did they cut out if it was $600,000? That to me is worthy of some kind of an audit, of finding out what they spent the money on. If they didn't do what you were told they were going to do.
To me, it's almost courtesy. Someone's going to hand you. I don't care if they hand you $5,000. You should be able to tell. They should at the end of the project be able to tell them what you did with it. I mean, nobody gives. Anybody else gives you money. They don't. There's a stipulation. Why should we not get something? I don't think they need to write a 12-page report, but it'd be nice if they.
Well, Jamie, for instance, on the clock project, you get bills and you paid them, so you have a record of receipts and everything of what they spent the money on. Do you know how they spent their money when they got that money for the clock?
I have a record of the clock project that goes back to 2005.
Harry's clock.
It's
Harry's figure.
I brought this up 3 or 4 years ago. I wanted to know where the hell the money went. How come we're spending, and why now we're spending? How come it isn't running? And we finally got it running shortly after.
I mean, I have the records are in the office.
Couldn't believe it. 25.
In other words, you have records. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
They are better records since 2012 than before that.
Okay, I know exactly where she's going, and we'll leave it. Do we have anything else to discuss? Oh, the next meeting. So, February 18th.
You want to do a time change on that?
I'd like to, because I have to be at our theater at 7 o'clock, so I'd rather not start at 6:30 than walk out the door. Can we do something like 6 or 5:30 even?
I cannot do 5:30, but I could do 6.
Just so you know, I get off work at 6 in Amherst, so.
I don't want to hurt other committee members just because of my thing.
Does Thursday night make sense? Are there better nights?
Switch it to Wednesday for that one.
Yeah,
I like
Wednesday.
Thursday because it's like blocked out for the rest of the year.
Yeah,
I got other things on other nights.
Yeah,
but-
Wednesdays in Park Rec, and it varies. I think we just.
I can't do
changed it.
Wednesdays, it's either city council or finance committee. so-
Yeah, you're pretty
Park
strong.
Rec, still have to meet, man.
Tough guy.
John's tough.
Well, let's keep it 6:30, it's not fair.
I tell you what, well, if I'm the only one,
You're not the only one, I'm the only one, I wanted to change it for me.
if I'm the only one that can't make that time, let me see if I can make an exception on the third Thursday of every month. I'll just come in earlier.
Well, we're talking about this one time.
Early
Right? You're not
January
talking
works for me as
One
well.
time.
Oh, just one time?
So we're talking about next
times.
month, when next month's meeting is,
Oh,
and we're proposing
not
at
a
6
problem.
o'clock rather than 6:30.
Fine.
And even at that, I may have to leave in the middle of it, but I'd like to try to vote on the football project.
Let's change it to 6 and go from there.
Okay, so Jamie, you'll.
So the next meeting will be February 18th at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
But we're going to keep the regular meeting time the third Thursday at 6:30?
We're gonna try and keep it at 6:30, or
Okay.
it'll always be Thursday.
Okay.
Let's put it that way, because it just depends. I didn't think it was gonna be an issue with it, I didn't think it was gonna be chair either.
We'd like to have you here for the meeting, so, you know, it's
Well,
a
I'll do the
priority
best I
too.
can. Okay, so, anything else, guys? I think we're all set.
Do you guys have any thoughts or questions after going through your first meeting? I mean,
This was enlightening, especially the fact that we have projects ongoing.
I appreciate you raising that question, because it's not we don't do that often.
All I can say is, I'm sorry I got on that woman about that.
You just gotta keep your cool, Harry.
We spent almost $900,000 on football fields and soccer fields, and have somebody say, well, we're not doing anything for the kids.
But see, you misunderstood what she was saying. Recently, what she was saying is recently the city has started to support,
Recently.
which includes the things you're talking about, but later on. But earlier on, I don't think we had that support. I certainly, and it may be pre-CPA.
Yeah, they've been seeing it coming out of the committee, but the committee, you know, CPA's only been around for.
Well, what really changed for them,
Less than a decade.
what really changed for them is the law changed that allowed renovation of recreation fields, because it used to be interpreted that you could only use CPA money for building new recreation facility, not renovation of old. So the fact that they could renovate the football field wasn't allowed a few years ago, and the baseball fields and everything else. But to be honest with you, being on the council and knowing our budget, if the CPA didn't exist, nothing would happen in our recreation, affordable housing, well, nothing would happen, because the budget isn't there. We're laying off people in school, everywhere. So we have to pay for our regular activities, so nothing would happen in these areas without CPA money. We're lucky we have it.
And just for some context, that old City Hall building, the entryway and foyer is
They did a really nice
they
job.
did a really nice job. It's scratching the surface for the request level that is going to probably come down the pipe.
Oh, they'll be coming down, there's no question about it.
Yeah.
And it would be a boon economically if we can get that upper hall done.
Absolutely. So, and we have.
We're looking
you know,
at a multi-million-dollar project.
We have this million, but don't get the idea that these dollars are just sitting around in there. We're going to be used because
No, but it
we're going to get
concerns
some
me
requests
that
for
we
some
don't get.
some more big dollar requests coming down the pipe.
I do want to remind everyone that the committee does have the authority to bond projects out of the CPA budget. So just to keep that in mind, when and if these big projects do come down the road.
So in other words, if we bond a multi-million-dollar project, we know that every year we have to commit so many hundreds of thousands to pay on that bond.
Exactly.
So that's not a bad way to get a major project done. I like that. And we've done that with the city, obviously the schools and things like that.
But is that typically, sort of a new thing that we're anticipating getting these big? Because it seems like each year we're not spending actually what we have typically, right? I mean, so
It depends. It depends. With the windows across the street, that was in
the windows where
$300,000
on Cottage Street.
Oh yeah, sure.
Did we approve? You guys approved that?
Riverside Industries.
Yeah, Riverside. That was how many?
300,000.
Well, that was our part, but then the total.
250,000 for 15 Cottage Street.
Yeah.
Better
So
process.
that was a over $1 million project. But,
I think you're right. In a given year, we often don't use all of the money spread out over several years. We get some large projects that can that's why we have these sort of undesignated or other balances that are not specifically reserved for X, Y, or Z. We can use those for an appropriate cost. It's, big dollars.
It's good context. I mean, when we're looking at 170,000, it's like, what is that? What percentage of what we're actually looking to do? Like as far as like what the requests typically are versus, they're the only ones asking. Like, of course, you know what I mean?
Well,
if there's 100,
we can always anticipate what requests are going to come down.
But I'm just looking at like historically, like do we, you know what I mean? Like in kind of people that are more tapped into this than
400,000 for a boardwalk,
And that's one of the reasons why we went to four times a year was
to try to consolidate to be able to know.
What if we spent all the money in the first two meetings, and then the third meeting we get a big project? So we wanted to have the first quarter we'll get 3 projects in front of us, and we can decide maybe who's the most important one, or prorate. We'll only give you 100,000. You want
to all in one area of whatever historic preservation.
Right. And then does it ever happen that people
I'm trying
reapply?
to take minutes here, and it's hard when there's.
I'm sorry.
Can I make a point, Jamie? You're not sitting over there anymore. You're sitting right here. You look like you're some subordinate, and I don't agree. You're kind of helping us like a lot. So I want you at the table from now on, okay? Or I'm not chairing. How's that?
At my seat.
I'll slide over.
So do
Need a
like,
bigger table.
It bothers me. She's talking all the time, but she's all the way in the corner. Like she did something wrong.
Well, because I'm not on the committee.
It doesn't matter. You know, Barbara sits right next to the president of the council. Just as a context.
so when you were like saying, I mean, and this is just to understand, but like so like people, if you know the first time 3 come up, one sort of is more work. You know, like we vote on one. Do others typically like would they reapply later in the year when we kind of have a better sense of what available funds?
Well,
like, is that kind of the natural flow, or is that?
Well, we never know.
Yeah, right.
So, but we thought if we were voting each month for projects, that if we spent all the money in the first couple months, and then a really good project came in, and we've already spent everything,
Yeah, we'd be out of cash.
we'd be out. So we're just saying, well, let's vote 4 times a year, and that'll give us, maybe we'll get a first quarter's worth of projects in front of us. Not that there's many things going on right now, but then we can say, okay, well, we got three things in front of us. This one's really important. Maybe that one can wait till the next year or next quarter or whatever. That's
But reapplication.
yeah,
That does happen. Yeah. Okay.
Good. So I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Thank you for an interesting first meeting.